What's up, guys? My name is Hellene. I am the keykeeper. Tonight, we are going to be tuning into galactic mythology, a channel I recently subscribed to. They are doing a live stream called Maldek, Lilith, and Ancient Reptilians.
They call, which is also what they trace their origin to as coming from the comet.
Yeah, and I totally learned this recently. That like Maldek was like the 5-dimensional reality that the ancient dragons were existing on, and then there was lower density realities all on this planet, but they were like calling it different names depending on like what density of reality you were existing on. And I found that kind of interesting because that almost like makes all these different names that get thrown on the whatever the planet was in the asteroid before it was the asteroid belt, kind of like all existing together, because it's like Phaeton, there's Maldek,
which are like the same names, but then also they say like when that civilization kind of collapsed, that maybe it came over as the Atlantis.
Yeah.
Atlantean civilization, but then like Hopi, Navajo, Pueblo Indians, as well as Egypt. Like so many civilizations say, we came from like feather-tailed serpents in the sky, meaning comets or meteors.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at like recently, I just was looking at like where the biggest meteor craters are, and like I just thought it was interesting because like the biggest one in the world is from like right where Elon Musk was born, like in South Africa, and I was like, interesting. And then the other one is in Arizona, like the Barringer crater or like mound.
That's so interesting. I love that movie, The New Daughter, which is also very Artemisian with everything that we have been decoding upon the return of the gate of Punarwasu and the Aditian split. And also what they are discussing here as it relates to, let me just see at that point.
And this is where just from like right where Elon Musk was born.
like Elon Musk was born in Pretoria, in South Africa. And it's very interesting how the threads of what Credo Mutwa said about Egypt being here, the Garden of Eden being here, various outlets that told me like the Limpopo River and those rivers that connect our great rivers upwards into the Nile, and that is the downpour, because we are actually Egypt. It's very interesting how America also claims that in like a split serpent through a comet notion of like I see those climates very similar to like what we produce, like everything that makes Hawaii, unlike the types of fruits and stuff that like we can produce here.
South Africa, and I was like, interesting. And then the other one is in Arizona,
which is interesting because my leak project Rex Bear is like a Polaris cathode to like my Rahu Ketu, trying to find the sinusoidal wave of my 18.6 in the birth years of what all these things mean. Because I watched Leak Project. It's probably the longest channel that I've watched consistently for like new releases on like just conspiracy theory culture and, just like not drinking the Kool-Aid, but listening to everybody. But, I love Rick's Bay, and I mean, he did wear the tinfoil hats and like talks about all sorts of energy drinks that are like pure hydrogen, or I don't know what he sells, and that's not my place to like, I'm not critiquing that. I would love for especially us South Africans, because I feel like we don't always have trust in like new technology or new innovations that come from like small producers. It's like we want to make sure we give our kids Johnson and Johnson's baby powder, because it's like everybody's gonna see at the baby shower like, ugh, why didn't you buy like that? Like, I'm not saying like it's a name brand thing, but it's a very much needing to like have a certain image exposed factor apartheid, and in the image and likeness of like, oh, the queen visited here, and we are supposed to be this rainbow nation ideal of Nelson Mandela being a world stage icon. So just even that, Arizona connecting to just via ley lines and meteors and black goddesses and Artemisian Aditi principles. It's very fascinating to me.
Like the Behringer crater, or like mound. Mound. And this is where the
And I watched that movie of Kevin Costner with like the new daughter, where the girl was also abducted into a mound to breed with, to be like the queen of like a dying race of like ant-men or something. Like, they weren't really like, the images were obviously giving those images, but it was very much giving like homunculi burrowing figures as well, mudmen, mud flood figures, or survivals of like serpent mound burials, or like naga sacrifice, or I don't know what it was giving, but they were having these hissing sounds and these very peculiar sounds. It was like something between like, being like salamander-esque and fungal. I don't know. Did you guys watch that movie Gaia from like, it's also like a South African actress plays in it as well. Gaia. So yeah.
Like their sacred site was, where they say a meteor fell to the earth and their people came from this. Okay. And so, I think like existing on other planes in higher energy fields is what, like, one of the keys, almost like chakras, to releasing what the Mayans call the two-headed serpent, or what yogis call, that like the Kundalini through meditation. I think like there's actually more to meditation and the connecting with these higher energies.
Yeah. 100%.
Reading natal charts, analyzing your own cosmic reality. And unlocks automatically past, present, future. So all of a sudden you're existing,
Well, then you're like connecting in your reality with like where you are right now in this physical form, and then with your higher self that's existing in higher densities, and in some cases you can consider that the future. and then you have like where you came from. Like we all kind of have like a degenerative form as well. Like that's kind of where this concept of gray aliens come from, is actually they're like a degenerative form of us as humans. They're like, they are us. So any extraterrestrial or interdimensional that we can perceive is a part of us. And when we do meditation and spiritual work, or tune in with astrology to, you know, align ourselves with our heart-centered path, like you start to see all those different parts of you. And we also have like the ability to travel to outer space by going inside. Like there's quite an interesting play of words here when you think of outer space and inner space.
That was really beautiful. I think the live stream concluded there, and I didn't tune into it from the very beginning, so let me just check for it. Okay, I can download it. It was 17 minutes long. I just want to hear the intro and the points that they build up to. You know, sometimes we can start at the end and get to the beginning.
I'm so excited to have a reading with you, just for someone who even understands like that there may be an asteroid belt and that it may exert some sort of cosmic or galactic influence.
Yeah.
Like in and of itself, that scientific phenomena, most people are just like not even aware of that science or something.
Or it's like they're taking what the mass like science community wants you to believe, and so you're not like thinking beyond or like reading between the lines of what they're presenting. I do think it's interesting that some scientists even kind of like come to the conclusion that it was a planet that exploded in some capacity, but they don't want to like,
yes,
you know, 100% claim that.
Yeah, like, I've gone back for my book, and the Titus IV principle of 1783, both of these early astronomers hypothesized that the divine maker would not leave the space in his divine order blank. And that was sort of their analytical perspective, but now this dispersion theory as a physics phenomena also contributes to an understanding of the positioning of Ceres, of what would have been hypothesized as Maldek, and this Maluna.
Maluna.
And, you know, this idea that we would have, there would have been a planet there within an order based on planets, you know, exponentially positioned, radiating outward. But I don't know. It's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think like the whole lore, or just like the story with the asteroid belt and like the planet that it was prior to being what it is now, is kind of this almost like foreshadowing of like where our Earth could potentially be going if things continue to be developing in this more kind of like physical, obsessed, like technology based external reality that we kind of live in as a Western society, especially. But
yes,
consuming resources to the point that the Earth will get to a similar state that like Maldek got to, where it you know, gets compromised in some form or another, either by its own undoing or from like outside forces exploding it. But it's just this concept of creating an energy in our planet that is more like might is right, versus like being able to actually listen to what's happening to the Earth and working with it as one of its species living on it.
You know, I think you're uniquely positioned to understand the concept because you work with natal charts, and it's circular, almost like a galactic round, like a galactic compass. If that's what a natal chart is, it can become a model to replicate, you know, the point of a single planet or a single person within a cosmic order. And that's how we can say the asteroid belt may have looked different at some time because of the positions of these other points within a whole. And, you know, just to understand the incredible magic in one person's natal chart, I think it's to unlock a compass to understanding the whole galactic order. And that's such a bigger conversation than, oh, was it or wasn't a planet? We're all part of one solar system, and we have to understand that we're actually working together.
It's as above, so below, and I think looking at natal charts and understanding them like gets your mind working in a more of a cosmic.
Yes.
So you start thinking in bigger scopes, and I think with that exercise of thinking bigger, you kind of start getting natural truths from the cosmos. So one thing I noticed about your chart, speaking of Ceres, is it's conjunct your Lilith, which is Black Moon Lilith is kind of this representation of the darker feminine, like the feminine that's rejected in the mass society, because it was Lilith is the bride that was intended for Adam in the beginning, but she ended up rebelling and not wanting to be tied down.
Yeah.
And it's really closely conjunct Ceres here in Pisces.
I have Ceres in Pisces and Lilith in Virgo. So there's definitely something to that interplay that I am feeling at this time. Because it's like finding my sickle that holds the darkness and bears the light of the darkness, and just everything I've been unconscious of thus far when I was, you know, not like taking anything seriously, and I was just like floating to survive in all sorts of stories.
Also, this placement, this point in space is really close to the fixed star Fomalhaut, which is a fixed star in this constellation called Piscis Austrinus. And the whole thing with Fomalhaut is it's connected with the angel Gabriel, Archangel Gabriel.
Yeah. And hashtags like dissident.
Gabriel has a lot to do with the conception of Jesus and also just communication and things such as that. And that was kind of something I was noticing pretty heavily in your chart, is this emphasis to interact with people and like be a communicator. Does that resonate with you?
Yes. Yeah. Like I feel like I want to simplify this wisdom, this, you know, cosmic wisdom, like galactic truths about who humans are, that we come from the stars, we're divine, you know, manifest order, every cell of our being, just like a star would be, you know, but also, it's like we're absolutely humans, and mortality is something that, and you know, like I feel driven to share a coded message too about also just like what it means to be people. But also I think like a little bit lately, like I'm kind of interested how it's related to like something like with Lilith, because it is kind of hard, like, you know, to communicate with people. And a little bit you know, like I don't mind being like outside of people, and like I work better like that a little bit too. But I know I need to connect with people. Like, is it?
If you watched my natal chart, at the very end of it, my astrologer does tell me that the emphasis of your life's work and everything that you are panging away in a Saturn in Aries fifth house, trying to stream and scry the moon Pluto conjunct in the 12th in Scorpio. What I'm trying to bring to my sixth house is how to have Taurus, how to just have the most natural Venusian impulse expressed as earthly being, fixity that is able to move and plant the bullseye of dreams into the very ground that it creams. Just utterly sensorially, because Taurus is very known for its five senses, and it rules the throat, and I believe it's the taste also, and that is a Venusian principle. And yeah, like, just the fact that I always felt like there's this whip behind me trying to like get me to like feed the earth with my inner milk, you know, and the fact that I was always so retentive of, like, I felt I kept most of the secrets and the best part of the dreams and the visions and stuff to myself. And now I'm at this point of like, oh, I don't want to mrigashira get a deer head staggeringly cut by forgetting just the fullness of every bullseye that I have is a wholeness that like connects to like the Uranian fractal expressed to the Neptunian crystalline sea of the Pluto unconsciousness coming into mercurial being, and the moon being the sun that is the light reflected as it seems with its scythe the sickle of Mars, Saturn, and the challenge of Hera, Aphrodite strife. So, the individualists versus the legions. It's very... It's very Scorpio of the moon, of the latest transit that I've been feeling, and it's very syncretous to the journey of at Bacchus Lake, where we have been trying to figure out like where does our quote-unquote negative space or mania or negative energy or whatever the archons are feeding on to sustain a reality of a light code lockdown, like what is the bit of it that we can coin, you know, how can we like impress upon matter in a way that isn't this materialistic hoarding, whoring, necromanting, death culturing metastasization of ignorance and evil that only benefits people who, like, God knows what in their right minds makes them have the stomach to do the types of things that are happening in the world just right now. Like, for whatever ideal, right? Like, I'm just like, as much as I can fight I can't fight. Like, it's never a fight if you are like hurting innocent people. When hurting one person is just like a means to aggravate somebody else into reacting to you, or like that's just like, that's not in the true martial spirit, the Athenian wisdom of war. However we want to like Roman, Greek, Trojan, that notion of, like, I don't always understand Slick Dissident's worldview in terms of the Greek and Western European and American history that he finagles in this Nietzschean tarot enneagrammatic worldview of archetypes playing out according to these, it's like they always need to carry a torch in a relay race of, this is what was done before and this is how I'm going to finagle those meanings and pun it into this era, so that I am like multidimensionally avataristically channeling like myself. So yeah, like it was just like this notion of understanding what stars in our language through celebrities really are, and what these notions of cupbearer and vestiges and sacredness and mothers in the opera and the prima donnas and the divas and divas really mean in terms of like building the towers to heaven. Because sure, we have to have a tarot card moment of falling out of that tower, a la Mariah Carey, and the whole journey of what her name has told me in terms of, it's not about what she has been, it's about what the code reads and transcribes as like my fan fiction in a multi-dimension of, these were the potentials of those words, these were the coined phrases and meanings related to planets and placements that is always being Shutterbishak renaissanced into like corpus hermeticum spirals of formulas behind Leonardo da Vinci's paintings, and then when they show it to you, it's like the geometries pop out, and it's like they were grimoiring that and like creating a new age technological compound of all the generations is genes, like everything that's like confirmed, like all the opposites of the pairings, and like these puns, it's like they stimulate us to like create the raps and the lyrics and the, like, we are the human designers, we are the projectors and reflectors of golden screens and silver screens, and we are digits of all, and you know what I mean? Like all these puns, do you see the D in it all? Playing just constantly like a tree ring or a ripple away. I don't even know what, but it's like so beyond my being able to have one word for it, that like the energy of the living word, the Holy Spirit, that void and that deprivation that is the kind of like life-bearing corrective Virgo fully formed unicorn problem solving unique genius of like Athena being is his favorite in that way, and finding its opposition within her brother Ares, who is her shadow, which Alice Bailey does give that to Mercury, and Velikovsky gives Athena to Venus. So it's just, oh, where are we gonna get caught up now to be like, this is where the map says Athena lived, when the story is like evolving from so many other places, like the very tapestry, and like, wasn't she based by Arachne in the craft of weaving?
I think that that's something, because I started to try to have like more of a meditation practice so I can think about concepts like this, you know, and like try to direct, you know, prana, energy flow to things like, you know, communication, and also like, you know, meeting people who have some more like of this like truth and wisdom that I need to interact with, and because that, you know, communicating these ideas to people is, you know, really what's motivating me. I have my job and like my life and stuff, but this book is, you know, I'm really thinking about it.
Yeah, that Lilith in Pisces too. You know what's interesting is I actually have my Lilith in Pisces, I think on that same degree, I'm starting to realize. And one of my personal challenges is having confidence in what I'm saying. Because I think with Pisces nature, it can be easy to kind of like drown out yourself, almost like disbelieve yourself with your connection to higher source. And that's something that I've been really trying to like work on, is when I feel like sharing something, to like trust myself and not let this little wounded Lilith and Pisces be like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know about this mystic stuff. Like you're an imposter. It's like, that's what Lilith and Pisces might be saying to you subconsciously, because there's a part of your like soul or something that occurred like earlier in this life as you were a child, or in past lives, where like someone like put a lot of doubt in your ability to be connected to source, or maybe you've had like a
or even like
an interesting relationship with religion growing up or something
April,
like that.
I'm gonna say the Annunciation, like that's when Mary is visited by an angel, and you know, I think that, you know, that's how I kind of relate to my book, both in a sense that, you know, some of my research tells me things like, you know, the self-destruction on Maldek may have been guided by being a light planet, but, you know, like Lucifer and like fallen angels are really light bringers.
Yeah.
Angels are light bringers, and you know, so it's really a slippery slope that you know, I want to communicate in my book too, you know, and but also like with myself about having the confidence to talk to the angels, to listen, but also to talk about the experience of, you know, speaking with the angels. I think that gives me something to, you know, focus as a confidence point, you know, and you too, it sounds like, you know, like I think it's more than, like, it's not a Lilith voice, it's like, these are the voices of angels. And
that was very beautiful. The History Valley is live right now, called The Apples of Apollo, Pagan and Christian Mysteries of the... what would that be? Ulysses. Let me just go to my notifications. Oh, the Christian Mysteries of the Eucharist. Let's tune in. So that we just watched was Galactic Mythology, Maldek, Lilith, and Ancient Reptilian. So that was very interesting. Because I already watched the part of where I tuned in earlier, I'm not going to go back to that. Comment down below what you guys thought of those revelations as it relates to the journey of at Bacchus Lake, your own journey, and everything else that the wordplay and the punnery brought to life within the process of purifying the keys to these words to know how we are always empowered. We are never without power, we are never without choice. And it's about learning to hold pure and sacred the full cup of what is the unminted of potential when we are mentally trying to intend towards what would be the mint conditions of a choice. We have to always accept that our choice is not gonna be the best for somebody else because it's not the reality that they want to create, and we have to respect that. And where are we gonna go when we learn that we cannot create inverted feedback loops that makes us run away from karma or paying the price for our own intention becoming manifest in the world? And in terms of that, as a sacrifice, learning to die with grace, because as she said, there is something about us being mortal that it's basically what the spirits are jealous of in that iteration of the stories, because we get to like feel our pain, they only get to kind of like see the other side of the screening process of what that is. I don't know, like if we are fallen angels because we actually like fell in love with matter and gets to feel it and gets to be enlivened and nourished by it. We need to be able to talk to ourselves and use these names with the respect of what our ancient knowledge teaches us before it was usurped and turned against us.
That's what its etymological meaning is. We know what it was used for, however. It was depicted and it's described as the stalk of a giant fennel, into which plants have been stuffed. And it was the symbolic container. I mean, in actual fact, they may have used baskets or bags, but it had the symbolism of what you put the wild plants that you gathered into. So it indicates that the Bacchus, or the Maenads, were symbolically gathering wild plants. We know what the wild plant prototypically was. It often is depicted and also described as being stuffed with ivy leaves. That modern ceremony for the Bacchus was only for women. We know metaphorically what happens from many vase paintings. They are being attacked sexually. But the creatures who are attacking them are not of our realm of reality. They are goatmen, like satyrs, or horsemen, like Silines. And it's interesting also that the women seem to have no trouble beating off the advances of these creatures. So they're not really being victimized. They're playing and knocking them away from themselves. Another name is synonymous with the Thyrsus was the narthex, and the narthex has the apparent etymology of being the place, the with the sources would indicate that these Bacchans, or Maenads, were gathering wild plants, and prototypic of the wild plant was the ivy. And that what they were experiencing was some kind of sexual orgasm, but since the attackers are not of our realm of existence, it's imaginary metaphor for what they were actually experiencing, which was a cosmological union with their deity. And he is seen for these, he is shown for these scenes always in a particular way. He's obviously male, scenes always in a particular way. He's obviously male because he's bearded, but he's dressed as a woman. In addition to being dressed as a woman, he usually has a leopard skin thrown over his back or his arm.
When I was in grade 8 and I went to Ignote High School, we read The Leopard Boy, and it was such an interesting book. Comment down below if you've ever read that book. Oh, I loved that book.
So not only is he a male who dresses as a woman, as such mediating between the sexes and posing no oppositional threat to his union with the women, but actually the ideal lover, since he knows what it is to be a woman, but he's obviously a male. But also the leopard skin indicates that he's partially bestial or wild rather than cultivated. And that has all to do with the whole symbolism of what the Bacchans were doing. Now that is one version of his name. The other version of his name is Dionysus. And the women on the mountain are never called Dionysians. Dionysus, however, is the god who presides over the theater. It's the theater of Dionysus, not the theater of Bacchus. Many times people who don't know now might use them interchangeably, but they're not interchangeable. It's the theater of Dionysus, not the theater of Bacchus. Now, the name Dionysus has an interesting etymology. The story about Dionysus is that he was inseminated in his mother Semele by a lightning bolt from Zeus. And the lightning bolt, as you might imagine, destroyed her. But Zeus took the fetus that he had engendered in her womb and took it out of her body and sewed it into his leg, where it grew to term, and then he extracted it. And when he extracted it, there were people watching it. So he is a testifiable child of a father, which is totally unnatural for us humans. You know who the mother is, because you see the child coming out of the female. But you know who the father is only if you have subjected the woman to the rights of matrimony, so that the man owns her, and anything that comes from his womb, he can vouch to be from him. And in classical society, the women were ordinarily sequestered in the house of
Mariah Carey loves that word, sequestered, and it does have that quest and that equestrian horse of the number 4.
Of their husband. Yet, for the Maenadic Bacchic revel, they left the house and went out to the mountain and had this revel. The revel was called a komos, and komos is probably cognate with our word coma. And so it has, of course, the meaning of an ecstatic sexual romp, but it also is associated with that part of our consciousness which is unconscious. There's a mystery about our existence.
The orgasm.
We cannot stay awake forever. We have to go to sleep. If we don't go to sleep, the imaginings that work out during our sleep surface in our waking state, and we become crazy. It's not that you have to go to sleep so your body repairs itself. It repairs itself when you're awake just as well. So Dionysus, with the name, the first part of his name, belongs to his father Zeus. He's named after his father, what we are in patriarchal traditions. That Dios, beginning of the name, has lost the W sound, so it's actually Divos. And that word is cognate in Indo-European languages with the word for day, dies, and it's so much associated with the idea of divinity that it's the source of divine. So we've inherited this association of divinity with celestial existence and with daylight, and so on. He is never depicted as Dionysus, wearing a dress, bearded with a dress and a leopard skin. Instead, he's depicted as an idealized adolescent, nude male youth. So he's sort of here.
Hashtag animate twink figure. Hashtag Hellene meaning slender and fair.
Humanized, and definitely male. The second part of his name, however, the Nissus, that is related to Nissa. And Nissa is the fantasy land of sleep. It's the land of Nod. There's a Greek verb, nistazo, which means to fall asleep. So with his name, he mediates the realm of the unconscious, the realm of the female, and the daylight, rational consciousness of this celestial father Zeus. Dionysus, however, is a great mediator, and so his mother, who was destroyed, he eventually, Dionysus, not Bacchus, but Dionysus, will go into the underworld and find the remains of his mother and resurrect her to the celestial realm. And
come on, Ursula, little she-bear, shifting back into perspective after she stole the voice of Ariel within my soul in this weird way of how all of these archetypes had to kind of troll me in my unconsciousness of not knowing what I'm giving life to.
And she changes her name to Sione. Sione means, Semele is apparently the name of the great goddess. With the name Sione, she is designated as the celestial being, the celestial female. So, in its patronage of the theater, the theater is the materialization into our reality of events from a mythical, imaginary reality. The theater itself in Athens, there were two of them. Usually they are not connected to this topography, but at the top of, at the base of a cliff below which each of those theaters expands. One is the 5th century theater of Dionysus, and the second one is a Hellenistic period, Roman time theater of Herodotus Atticus.
I just want to read some of the comments that are in the live stream. He believes Jesus was just a myth. That's crazy. In the Bible, there's 5 trees: an apple tree, mother, palm, father, olive, Jesus, pomegranate, bride, fig trees, you. Bible is metaphors. On my page, I show the real Christian teachings. In reality, all religions are the same. In the Gospel of Thomas, it says there's 5 trees. Then The same person who said he believes Jesus was just a myth that's crazy says to the previous two comments from the same guy who he is responding to, that's garbage talk. And then guy comes back with the key to the max. The 5 trees are basically mentioned in the Quran, which I don't support, but mother goes by grapes. Also in the Bible it says grapestone. In 1884 Greek Septuagint, in Gospel of Thomas it talks about 5 stones that will minister. In the Old Testament it talks about gathering these grapes, then you eat. Basically learn to go to heaven. Jesus is who gathers grapes from thorns, basically the corrupt. The 5 trees are basically in the Egyptian religion, but different. Olive tree and some similarly other trees. Sounds like the cave in the spiritual house. So those are some of the comments that are popping off in the live thus far. Let's continue.
Most of them have a cave, and we know those caves were sacred. The sanctity goes way back from archaeological remains, and we know about the cave above this, the theater of Dionysus. That it is probably connected to a cave on the island of Salamis, where Euripides' family had an estate. They were wealthy, landed people, and yet there's the tradition that it was in this cave that Euripides composed his dramas. The cave was in use since great antiquity, so it was a sacred cave. And you don't have to go to a cave in order to have enough concentration or solitude to write. But nor can you write in a cave, it's too dark. But in addition to that, there was the tradition that he kept his library there. Now that would be absolutely ridiculous.
The Punarvasu recapitulation of the Rigoletto Beast Curse of the Tower Clenocte informed me about building this library of words for myself, from which, you know, the tragedy of my life can be the dramatics I imbibe my own gnosis with, because without the element of reality that makes it mine as a cross to bear, I literally couldn't own anything as reflective of my nature. And that's why, as a projector reflector, I am always seeing myself kind of like, it's like I'm better expressed through other people saying what I've been trying to say. And it gives me faith to believe in the fact that I am my own imbibing of creating this elixir of life, and how to just be nourished by life as you get it, you know.
This family had a fine house. You'd keep valuable manuscripts in your house. You wouldn't put them in a damp cave where you couldn't read them anyway, where they deteriorate from the moisture. So what was he doing in the cave? He was making his dramas, but making his drama doesn't mean writing them. It means getting the inspiration and what occurred to him in whatever trance state he entered of inspiration in the cave. He then materialized onto the stage in his productions for the stage. So the cave at the top of the theater makes the theater like the emanation from what originated in the cave. In fact, the seating area, the rounded area where you sit in the theater, is called the cavea, or in Latin, or the cave. And it could be simply because it's concave, but when you put it together with this, it looks like there might be an additional reason why it's called the cave. The Greeks called it the theatron. It doesn't have the same metaphor, it's just a place where you watch things. Now, with regard to that, one can consider, and I've written about this, that Plato gave up being a dramatist. He was well respected as a dramatist and had been chosen as one of the three poets who was going to have their play put on at public expense in the festival. But he stopped being a dramatist when he realized the irrationality involved in the trial of Socrates. In the trial, you had to first decide whether he was guilty of corrupting the youth, and so the vote was taken, and Socrates, by majority of the jurors, was found guilty. But the second stage was that you had to then propose what your penalty was going to be. And Socrates, as Plato narrates it, argued that he had tried to show that he had done a good thing rather than a bad thing, and therefore the only kind of penalty for a benefit that you're offering to the people is not a punishment but a reward. So he proposed that the city of Athens support him and feed him, house and feed him for the rest of his life. This so infuriated the jurors that more people voted to put him to death than originally thought he was guilty. That is complete irrationality, and Plato realized it was the irrationality caused by mythopoetic presentation. They were not thinking rationally, they were thinking mythopoetically. And so he stopped writing dramas. He did, however, continue to write dramas, because that's the reason why the dialogues are dialogues, they're plays, but not for the theater. It is likely, as a poet of the generation after Euripides, that he was a friend of Euripides. It's even likely that he may have attended whatever it was that Euripides did in his cave. Euripides may have not been alone. And his allegory of the cave then has great sense. The people in the cave are like people in a theater watching a projection of shadows on a wall, and they think that is reality. And you have to drag them out of the cave and show them this outside world, the sun and so forth. At first they don't like it because it's too hard to see, too much light and so forth. And then they finally get used to it. Oh yeah, I thought that was reality, and this is reality. Then Plato says, yeah, but this is the cave now, and this is not reality. This is just a reflection of the true reality. So it is this mediating figure of Dionysus who is the great intermediary. Now, with regard to plants, the thyrsus, which is the emblem of the herb gatherers, wild plants, is stuffed with ivy leaves, and the ivy is a plant that resembles the grapevine. However, it's different from the grape. It's wild, and it produces berries which are shriveled, not juicy. And the ivy and its berries are toxic to eat, whereas the vine, you can eat the leaves in Domodakia, modern Greek cuisine, and you can drink the juice of the grapes, and that is obviously not poisonous. But you can't, the ivy, the grape does not produce grapes unless you prune it annually. So you can't let it be a wild plant. It wants to go wild. It wants to become the ivy, but you intervene and each year force it back into being something civilized. That's why vineyards have those stumps, thick stems, from which the grapes grow. But those are pruned back every year to grow over again. So it's a civilized plant, a cultivated plant. And then upon the juice of the cultivated plant, you can grow a intoxicant by the action of fermenting fermentation produces bubbles as if it were boiling. It's like cooking. And then on it, it produces ethanol, which is an intoxicant. However,
This is very interesting when we go back a couple of videos on the channel where we incorporated Slick Dissident discussing Era, the Fool card, the Altair constellation as a negative space that is invoking the changes of mood by the implication and recapitulation in art throughout different eras and renderings. Very interesting in terms of like how the mind altering substance is very artistically psychedelic, and we always hear about creative people feeling these quote unquote black market amphetamines to boost their intellect or their genius. And I don't really do any of that. I don't know if black market amphetamines is like Slick Dissident world code for like the mint of your black in the imagination that isn't lighted up yet and where you can still find space to braid and dream. Because like I think that's what my mind has in abundance. That's why I feel like I'm such a knowledge whore, because I feel like I'm a black hole with like nothing stays there. Every day I wake up and I'm like, I have to remind myself what my name is.
but that's interesting enough in itself. But the Greeks didn't drink their wine as simply the ethanol fermentation. They did a very strange thing. They mixed their wine with 3 or 4 parts water. Anyone who drinks wine will know that the sun is. Get a little bit out of the way. That's better. Anyone who drinks wine knows that if you mix it with 4 parts water, it doesn't taste like wine, and it's not very intoxicating. By natural fermentation, you can get only at the most 30% ethanol. You can get higher concentration only if you distill it. That was an art that was learned in the Middle Ages. It was associated with alchemy. It was unknown in antiquity, so it's only simple fermentation. You dilute it with that much water, and you have a very weak and tasteless drink. However, it was not weak and tasteless. We know how much you had to drink in order to get quite intoxicated. And the Greeks, for drinking wine, there are different vessels depending on the ceremony, but the ordinary civilized way of having drinking Dionysus was a party only for men, as contrasted to the Maldek ceremony, which is only for women. The wild ceremony is only for women, but the symposium only for men, or for women who are not bound into subjugation by the art, by the rite of matrimony. These were educated women who were called female companions. They were to think of them as prostitutes or whores is doing a disservice, because unlike the ordinary wedded female, these were women who had been educated, and they competed with men intellectually, and were of high status. So that Pericles, who gives his name to the classical age as the Periclean age, he divorced his wife and took up openly living with his hetaira, whose name was Aspasia. We know that the intoxication was real. And you drank it in this, for the symposium out of a culex. Culex resembles our wine glass. It has the same meaning ritually as the wine glass. If you want to drink something that's going to get you drunk, drink from a mug. If you have a wine glass, you might toss it over, but that's the whole point. In a cocktail party, you're supposed to drink but not get drunk. And the glass challenged you not to be drunk. So the culix was even more unstable than our wine glass, since it was a broad saucer on a stem. You didn't drink as much as you wanted at the symposium. Your host just decided how many rounds of drinks it would be. It would be laid out, and then you drank it and continued being brilliant intellectually, but you were challenging it. The reason that it was so intoxicating is that in the mixing ceremony with water, they added flavoring herbs, and many of them we can document as being toxic. And so it was a mixture of the product of civilization, the grape, its juice, the fermentation, and the wild antecedents of cultivation, the primitive wild plants. In fact, the agent of fermentation is the fungus of yeast, which is the wildest of all plants because it has no discernible seeds. It seems to just pop up by itself from the forest floor. And yet, that wildest of wild plants has been subdued into cultivation in the manipulation of the yeast producing ethanol. So, what wine represented was civilization, intelligence, the male dominance, and the evolution towards the higher nature of our humanness. Whereas you cannot, however, have one aspect without paying attention to the opposite. I began by saying that the God has two identities, and that there are many identities within us. In order to correctly enjoy the benefits of the altered consciousness of Dionysus as the god of civilization and the drama, you have to give an equal respect to his precedent, his primitive nature, and what those women on the mountain were doing. We cannot know except by metaphor. We do know that they got very intoxicated. Historical account, not a poetic account. They came down.
It's so funny, Nez, that like during that experience that I mentioned, my grandmother was literally saying about the women that they cannot, like they were never supposed to drink. So it was almost like she was saying something about this, like the fact that there was a separate ritual for the men and for the women how to partake in the waters of life, and that, you know, what he's saying, like the products of civilization and fermentation, you know, that was one thing, and then the antecedent products of cultivation, like, you know, like the yeasts and the fungi and the wild plants and the things. Like when I had that experience, I literally had to tell my grandmother that she needs to be like taking the ethanol burning from my tongue and just like put it into the food. And she was literally like she was sipping it. So it's just like, I don't always understand these things, but it's like I know what my experience was when it was my experience of things. And every day I can learn that there is information for which I am a little bit more ready than yesterday to have space for and love and acceptance for, and extending it to all the spores and elements and rhizomes and just all the memory of my DNA and my generation, you know, because that was the thing that ultimately like um created what was that tower beast moment in myself, because it was like, what am I gonna do with all this knowledge if I can't apply it to discriminate between what is good for me and what is not good for me, and always trying to like imbibe in everybody else's take on that, um when always I always knew what my body said, par none to what anything else was saying. So it's very deepening watching, this is History Valley, the apples of Apollo, pagan and Christian mysteries of the Eucharist.
So the function of the Amanita clearly has to do with the coming of Indo-European traditions of patriarchy and the transition from the entheogen in its connotations and the matriarchal female dominant.
And I was literally like having to tell her that like there are spirits around us that wants me to forget you guys, and forget you guys in your myths of Hansel and Gretel, because they've made you witches and stealers of changelings and Benere Jesuit, whatever that was on Dune, forgive me. Like, like Moonchild mothers, Marys and Mariahs, and all sorts of, we don't know what anymore, but like the sacred feminine is here, guys. It's undeniable, and it's like, it is the only true substance by which God begot his son to have a conscious material expression on the cross of matter, because it's where what mattered to both of them came to this fusion point. Because I see myself in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. The Uranus Gaia separation of it all, the incestuous shoot definite of it all, the water fire of it all. I felt it in the entirety of my being, and across every reality, across which my measure of the eternal waters of life that was dousing this fire of my consciousness, even if it had to have these muddy shadows to just kind of like create a chiaroscuro to all of the light that my sun, Mercury, Venus on the 7th house, like that, because I have my sun conjunct the descendant, Venus at the tippy cusp of the 7th, wanting to be in the 8th house, but my whole sign being in the 8th house in Cancer, and then my Mercury being in the 6th house, but my whole sign in the 7th house in Gemini. It's just, sometimes it's a lot for me to actually realize why I needed to have my moon Pluto in the 12th house, to like have all of these shadows to encapsulate my own projection field, to contain the vastness of my Punarvasu. Like when South African gale is happening, like when we kiki amongst our queer sisters and brothers, like they would be like, "Ooh, girl, just vast." Like, and I'm always that person who can like take the flame and make a bonfire, because I'm just like that breath of life. Like, I can't shut up. Like, I am that Artemis, that Rohini, that Prajapati fell in love with. I am the apple of God's eye. I am he who is like God, Galen the key. 'Keeper. 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 '
society, of which we have ample evidence from archaeological sites, such as Knossos, the Palace of Minos.
Knossos. Minos relates to the Minotaur, and that relates to Taurus and Venus, and the is it Mitra? But yeah, Gemini is Rama, so Ra and Ma, and so Orion, Rohini, the divine twins of the Dioscuri, just like that whole Gate of Man crowning situation happening in Cancer, where we have Pushya. You know, it's very just telling of like this whole Scarabenus birthing process.
Is that to the patriarchal tradition of classical society? The interesting thing about classical patriarchism, however, is that it is not totally patriarchal. It makes these mediations with primitivism as they saw it. I don't mean to say that female dominance is primitive, but historically, for the Greek lands, it was earlier.
This is very the Woman King in just the trigger, and also the idea of like veiled unicorns and mermaids and all the little kikis that we've been encoding as to like who are our high priests and priestesses on the world stage. Are they still virgins? Are they finicky Katyoni Punarvasu defiled? Automation unchaste? Like, it's just so perverted to think about it like that, but like at the same time it's trying to give personality to eternal truth that needed to change in order to be human and whole. Because whose fault is it if they identify with an archetype and figure out, but I didn't uphold every written letter of what this archetype stood for, but then you find out actually you did, and in a multidimensional way you still had a unique life story to tell the tale of the heads or feet of the braille of the Urania egg that the serpent gailed about, gagging on all these things.
Than male dominance, and with wild nature, and certainly before we learned the art of cultivation, we did live off of wild things. That makes mediation with that. It doesn't destroy it. It honors it and transmutes it. And the greatest transmutation is the birth of Athena. Like Dionysus, who had a witness birth from his father, totally unnatural, she too had that kind of birth. And when after she dresses as a man, she's a warrior. She will always testify that the father is the parent because she didn't have a mother. And she wears as a commemoration of her own primitivism, because you always have to mediate with the other, even though she's totally made over into this patriarchal daughter. She wears a commemoration of her former identity, the Gorgon head on her breastplate. And if you do not honor her correctly, instead of being the goddess who inspires you with intellect and rationality, she turns against you and becomes a goddess of madness and plunges you into irrationality, intoxication, and so on.
What are the parallels between the serpent?
That is exactly what happened to me, guys. You know, like, knowing that I was like feeding life into likenesses that wasn't of evolution that I necessarily cared about whether it was righteous or not. I just wanted to not get my hands dirty, if that makes any sense. You know, like after a while, I think it also was kind of just conditioned out of like needing to survive the situation of like Titanochias and like every other day it could be Ragnarok at home. So like yeah, like me making fun of these things now, it's like recognizing that I have my fullest life to be able to like have the breath to know what I talk about and give it honor and know that it is all these different images of how the mind can bend and spear and flower and all of these things. Because when you are looking out into the world, you need to always stare into yourself. And I feel like I saw some people just kind of like, it's like their moon eye just kind of like left their body and went and possessed other people. And I felt like everybody in my house was having different sorts of nightmares and stuff. And it felt like I was somehow supposed to be like a circuit breaker, or like I needed to come clean so that like the plumbing of everything Scorpio can like go through the phoenix extreme of what needed to be figured out about like my mom's burnt foot and this mermaid spirit dreams that I've been having of like Mary Shaw and different Medusa like screams. You know what I mean? Because I did play God of War. I did have programming. I did have all sorts of stuff be not what I would have chosen, because when I was there, my was screaming out for, let's make different choices. Let's be better people. Let's not do this to each other. But after a while, it's like it made me so Ashleisha poisoned. I was like, I'm going to turn this against you, and I'm going to make war on all that is unrighteous in this. Because it needed to be honored.
Higher ethical value than being divine. I was just talking with my class before I came home to talk with you here about the Euripides tragedy about Heracles, where Heracles is the son of Zeus, although he could be the son of a mortal, Amphitryon. Everyone, as I said, you don't know who the father is. Could be someone or someone else, and prototypically someone or someone else means the complete oppositional possibility. So it could be someone celestial or divine. It could be someone mortal. In the case of Heracles, his mother slept with Zeus, and then while her husband was away, Zeus disguised himself as her husband. And then on that same night, her husband came home and slept with her. And so you can't tell whether Heracles was the son of Zeus or the son of the mortal. But if he's going to be celestial, he has to have Zeus as his father. In Euripides' play, however, Euripides presents an unusual situation where Heracles goes mad and kills his wife and his children, thinking that he's on his way to his celestial identity. And that is true. You cannot be celestial if you have human emotions, if you have a family, the burden of your mortality. So killing your wife and children is the apotheosis of his divine potential. But at the last moment, he doesn't kill his human father. when Athena throws a rock at his father and he falls asleep, and when he wakes up, he sees his father, and he tells his father, "Don't touch me, I'm polluted." But unfortunately, he loves his father, and his father loves him. That is good for his human persona, not for his divine persona. And what the play is showing, this Greek ethic, which is the basis of what we call the humanities, that the potential of our humanism is our great gift. It is something greater than the eternal existence of celestial beings.
That was The Apples of Apollo, Pagan and Christian Mysteries of the Eucharist. Dr. Carl A.P. Ruck, History Valley. You can find his book on Amazon. In the description, when the Apostle Paul proclaimed the new Christian mystery to be the facetious congregation at Corinth, it was clear that this Eucharist was meant to replace the pagan mystery that has been celebrated for over a millennium just a short distance away at the sanctuary of Eleusis. Christianity evolved within the context of Judaic and Hellenistic healing cults, magic, shamanism, and mystery initiations. All four of these inevitably imply a sacred ethnopharmacology, with traditions going back to earlier ages of the ancient world. The essays in The Apples of Apollo, edited by Ruck, Staples, and Heinrich, attempt to uncover the original food of the sacramental communion. After a preliminary review of the rites and etiquette of the sacramental wine of the god Dionysus, whom Christ would replace as sacrificial offering, the myth of Ixion, who is named for the semi-parasitic plant called mistletoe, is linked to Apollo's role in demanding human victims and the persistence of such rites in the Druidic solstice sacrifice of the wicker man. Behind the symbolism of the mistletoe and other psychoactive plants lurks the soma of the Vedic tradition and its botanical original, the fly agaric mushroom. Rather than being marginal to classical culture, the fly agaric and the array of metaphors its amazing transmutation suggests is central to the myths of the Greek heroes, and in particular to the first of them all, the hero Perseus, who reformed the religion practiced at the ancient city of Mycenae.